Good morning. Can I welcome members to the 31st meeting of the Education and Culture Committee in 2012. Can I remind members and those in the public gallery to switch off all electronic devices because they interfere with the sound system. The first item this morning is whether to consider item 3, which is the work programme in private. Do members wish to agree to have the work?
Could I move that we hold item 3 in public session?
Can I have comments? Usually we have it in private, but how do other members feel about it? Liam?
Normally we would have it in private, and for very good reasons. I think given the controversy around college funding, which I think we will discuss as part of the work programme going forward, it would probably be more appropriate for us to discuss it in public, but I think with obvious caveats in relation to how we do that.
Okay, Colin?
I'm comfortable to have it in public.
If there's no other points, then I think members seem to be agreed that we will have item 3 in public. Moving on, our second item is an evidence session on Skills Development Scotland. Can I welcome to the committee Danny Logue, Director of Operations, and Malcolm Barron, Head of Operations for the South East Skills Development Scotland, and Derek Chain, SDS Unison Branch Secretary, and James Corrie, SDS Unison Chairperson of Non-Departmental Public Bodies Group, Unison Scotland. Welcome to you all, gentlemen. Can I begin this morning's session with a kind of general question? I think obviously we're going to try and cover a number of areas this morning in the evidence, but can I just ask SDS, first of all, could you perhaps, for the benefit of the committee, outline what are your main priorities for the organisation, and secondly, what you see as your main challenges at the current time?
Thank you very much for the opportunity to come and speak today. The main priorities that we have within Skills Development Scotland are several. First of all, it's the focus on the services that we provide individuals of all ages in terms of careers, the career service that we deliver, and that's prioritising, for example, young people in schools, and also prioritising other age groups, adult age groups as well, in terms of the priority groups we have in there. Secondly, the other priority for us as well is about how we actually respond to the needs and the demands of the customer groups that we work with, particularly with employers, with parents, and with the individuals that we work with as well. The other priority, or other priorities we have as well, is particularly around the delivery of the Modern Apprenticeships National Training Programmes on behalf of the Scottish Government. And as you know, we're delivering 25,000 modern apprenticeships each year in relation to that. The other priorities that we have as well is about how we actually look at the modernisation of the career service, and that's about, again, building upon the research and what has been happening internationally and also locally in relation to developments such as, and responding to developments in the curriculum such as a Curriculum for Excellence, and how we then develop the career management skills that support young people and adults in terms of how they fulfil their career ambitions. At the same time, the other priorities that we have is with employers and how we respond to their particular needs. So, for example, employers are looking to how they fulfil their own particular skills needs and recruitment needs. And we've been working with employers through sector skills investment plans, regional plans, and recently we launched our Skills Force, which is a web offer to help employers find out what's available through public channels in terms of both local authorities, ourselves, and Job Centre Plus. The other priority, last two priorities I think I would probably want to mention at this stage is in relation to the partnerships that we work with and the infrastructure within local authorities and local communities, particularly around some of the developments that are happening through things like Opportunities for All in terms of that particular programme, and also in relation to the work we have with community planning partnerships and the delivery of the single outcome agreements in particular. Our focus on service delivery agreements, where we align our services to those that are happening within the local communities as well. And then the last point I think I would probably want to mention just now in terms of priorities are the staff that we have in relation to delivering those services, because the majority of staff in Skills Development Scotland are actually delivering services to individuals, and it's how we engage, develop and invest in terms of the services and the professionalism of those staff. We have record levels of investment now in terms of them, how we take those forward. So those are probably some of the key priorities that I would see just now. In terms of the challenges as we go forward, it's about how do we make sure that SDS and its partners align the services and the resources that we have. And I've given examples there in terms of the single outcome agreements, the review of that in community planning partnerships, and how we play a strategic role at the local level in aligning those particular services. The other challenge for us as well is about the policy framework as well. I've mentioned career management skills in relation to Curriculum for Excellence and how we align our services, particularly with schools. But it's also how we actually take forward our policies post-school in terms of, for example, opportunities for all, and some of the changes that are happening within there as well. So they're key priorities there. And also in relation to the challenges around youth employment and how we actually work with our partners in addressing those particular areas as well. And the last point I think we want to mention in terms of challenges in any time of change, as we're going through just now in Skill Development Scotland, is very, very important that we actually work with our staff and partners to fulfil those ambitions in terms of what was developed and highlighted in the Careers Information, Advice and Guidance Strategy that was published with Scottish Government last year. So there's a big challenge for us in how we engage with staff, work with staff and with our colleagues here today with the trade unions as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I wouldn't ask any supplementaries at this stage. That was a lot of a lot of priorities and a lot of challenges. So what I'm going to do is just move straight to questions from members, if that's okay, and then we can get into the detail of the issues as we go forward. So can I begin with Neil Finlay?
If I'm an employer and I approach Skills Development Scotland seeking their assistance to engage a young person in training, what options do I have in terms of support, public money, support for that training opportunity?
Maybe start with that. My colleague might add to that if I miss anything. I think there are one or two programmes which would support that. So the first, obviously, is the Modern Apprenticeship Programme, which will provide some support if they've got an apprenticeship, which is what they're offering. For small businesses, there's the Employer Recruitment Incentive, which is available for targeted young people. There are additional support mechanisms.
I mean, in monetary terms, then?
In terms of the cost?
£1,500.
£1,500.
Is that a wage subsidy?
That's effectively is a wage subsidy to take people on. In addition to that, you'll know that obviously some local authorities also supplement that, so they've got additional resources which they put in that as well. On top of that, there are also some supports in terms of if the employer wanted to put that young person through some initial training. So if we set aside the Modern Apprenticeship Programme, there's also the Flexible Training Opportunities Programme, which can be targeted at certain, at small businesses, which can help in terms of recovering half of that cost. So that's a shared responsibility with the employer.
See, my understanding is that most of the employers who approach it are being pushed down the modern apprenticeship route, and that is what is they're predominantly being the route they're being pushed down. So somebody might just want to have some vocational training, but actually they're very much driven by Skills Development Scotland into pushing that person into an apprenticeship.
My own sense would have been that what you do is you look and see what the needs of the actual employer are. There would be no point in pushing them down a route if that wasn't an appropriate route either for that role or for that employer. The scenario would be that I think obviously in terms of the young person, it's a very positive thing if they can secure a modern apprenticeship. It prepares them well for the future and gives them good opportunities to work from. But it is about listening to the needs of the employer and responding to that appropriately.
So, say I have a constituent who came to speak to me about Modern Apprenticeship Programme because they were concerned about it. They have a teenage daughter who works in a restaurant one day a week because they're at school. And their employer said, you're doing very well, we can put you through an apprenticeship. She only works one day a week, and yet she will have an apprenticeship. Now, that on the face of it seems a very good thing, but what people are concerned about is that the term apprenticeship has been abused, and it's not what people think it is. Does that have any legitimacy?
Yes, we have emphasised, as the Scottish Government have, the focus on modern apprenticeships. It is very much it's employer demand, and it must follow through the modern apprenticeship frameworks that have been approved through industry and through the Modern Apprenticeship Group. And there's a record number of modern apprenticeship frameworks that are there at various sorts of levels as well. So the purity of the Modern Apprenticeship Programme is essential. It is about people employed status within a particular job undertaking a modern apprenticeship framework. There have been references in other organisations and companies making reference to the term apprenticeship they would not gain support, financial support from Skills Development Scotland to support that particular framework. It has to be one of our areas. The other issue, you made a very good point about the connection between vocational skills in schools, for example, Curriculum for Excellence and its ambitions around skills for learning, life and work. And how do you then balance between educational attainment within schools through Curriculum for Excellence and at the same time looking for valuable work experience that complements what a young person is doing in schools and then prepares them for moving into the world of work. We're actually undertaking, we're about to publish a number of reviews. One is shortly a review of modern apprentices themselves in terms of what they've been doing within the modern apprenticeship, what's happened to them once they're finished. And secondly, we're publishing early in the new year a survey from 2,500 employers who've been involved in undertaking modern apprenticeships to get feedback from them about the value of it and how it actually meets their particular business needs.
Just to pursue that, so that's conceivable that would happen. That person, even though they only work 1 day a week, could fulfil a modern apprenticeship?
No, not just because they're still at school. So they're under. You mentioned the young person at school 4 days a week. Is that,
yes.
Yes. So that young person is still at school. So they're still a school pupil. They have to be employed by the company in relation to undertaking that particular modern apprenticeship once they've left school.
Day a week.
Yes.
They are employed 1 day.
They are, but they're still a school pupil and registered
So
school.
they couldn't
fulfil the modern apprenticeship.
Okay, thanks. Could I also ask about apprenticeships that are off a fixed term? So how many within the modern apprenticeship programme would say would be people on, say, a 1 year fixed term contract?
We would, in terms of the funding that we provide employers, it would be for the duration of the actual modern apprenticeship framework they're undertaking. That will range depending on the level and depending on the framework they're actually undertaking. The key issue is that a young person or an adult has to be actually employed with that particular company fulfilling that particular modern apprenticeship. Now, they're employed from day one, so it's employed status. And what we're doing as part of that, as I was saying earlier on, what we're doing as part of that survey now is to say, well, of the 2,000 young people who finished earlier about 6 months ago, we're following that through to see where are they now in terms of the employment they're in. Are they still with that particular company, or have they moved on to some other kind of job within another organisation?
I did have an exchange of correspondence with yourselves earlier this year, and there was a number of modern apprenticeships that are being completed within a 3 to 6 month period. There's a very, very high number that are within a 1 year period. I wouldn't expect you to give us all the statistics just now, but I just wonder, could you furnish the committee with statistics as to how many people are doing it within, say, whatever. I mean, you'll have your own timescales so that we can see whether the vast majority of apprenticeships are 3 or 4 year apprenticeships or whether they're being completed within 6 months or a year. Would I be correct in saying that probably the majority are in that year, are within a year?
The majority will be longer than that, but what we can provide the committee is detailed information in relation to all those particular frameworks and the average duration of those particular individuals following that particular job route.
Thank you.
Okay, Claire Adamson.
Thank you, Convener. Good morning. I'd like to ask a little bit about what Skills Development Scotland is doing in terms of equality action plans. Possibly particularly in the area of gender in the modern apprenticeship system. And also, I think I was on the Equalities Committee at the time. We took evidence previously about this, about underrepresentation of ethnic minorities, particularly in areas like the building trade, and just where you are with your action plan.
Thanks for the question. First of all, yeah, we have undertaken and regularly do equality impact assessments on all the programmes and services that we provide, including modern apprenticeship area. There's probably two issues around that. When we look back at a number of years ago, in terms of the split between male and female, in terms of from those undertaking modern apprenticeships, we're looking at something like about 73% of males were undertaking the modern, or 73% of the total cohort were undertaking modern apprenticeships back in 2008. That's now dropped to 57%, and females are at 43%. So we've seen a gradual increase in balance in relation to male-female split between those particular between modern apprenticeships, and that's partly reflected in the range of, as I mentioned earlier, the range of modern apprenticeship frameworks that are now in existence for young people and for adults to actually follow. The other issue for us as well is that we actually work very, very closely with a range of different organisations who promote equality in relation to the take-up, whether it's male-female or in terms of black and minority young people as well. So there's a number of initiatives and incentives happening around those particular areas, and also young people with additional support needs to encourage them. And Malcolm earlier on mentioned about employee recruitment incentive is a good example where we target young people who have got particular needs in relation to promoting them to employers in relation to undertaking a modern apprenticeship. So that's the kind of range of different areas we look at. There's a recent one that career-wise is a recent one that the Scottish Government are looking at in terms of encouraging young girls, for example, in relation to science and engineering and maths, but undertaking modern apprenticeships. So there's a lot of activity in this space. A lot of people in there, and perhaps it maybe needs a little bit more joined up given all the range of initiatives and different organisations within this particular area. So a lot of work happening in that, and even as recently as for example, the Modern Apprenticeships Awards, which were last week, some of you will know about that, and that again demonstrated the range of young people and adults who actually follow modern apprenticeships now. And I think the final point I would mention is around it's My World of Work, which is our web the web offer that we have, and in there we're encouraging young people from different backgrounds and adults to look at different types of career routes that perhaps traditionally they would not necessarily have looked at.
Yeah, I mean, and it's presumably, I'm sure Derek and James would want to speak about it, is also, I mean, our advisory staff are also there to challenge gender stereotyping and to open out. I mean, the whole point of careers guidance is to broaden horizons and make people think beyond what might be immediately obvious to them.
Could I just ask a supplementary, touching on the question that Mr Finlay had earlier on? We've had a lot of discussion about the college sector and how short courses, flexible courses seem to be appealing to women. Can you tell me a little bit about what, if there is flexibility for part-time working within the Modern Apprenticeship Programme, and if the shorter Modern Apprenticeships are gaining support from people who maybe don't feel like, as we're hearing the evidence in the college sector, don't want to commit to a 3-year, 4-year course? Or
I think the critical thing here is that they achieve the qualification. So the qualification, if it's possible to do it on a part-time basis, then that should be something that should be available. And quite a lot of, if you look at particularly at some of the older people who are, they've got skills, they've developed skills over a period of time, but they've had no recognition for that skill official, which means their transportability or portability of that qualification is not there for them. And I think that's the kind of thing that would be picked up in terms of the sort of thing you've mentioned, really.
My World of Work website and obviously the careers advice service that your staff provide. So I think a number of members want to come in this area, so I think we'll move on to that now, and I'll begin with Neil Bibby.
Can I start by asking the Unison representatives how the job or the role of careers advisors has changed over the past 12 months?
Thanks very much. We represent around about 70% of the frontline staff within Skills Development Scotland. Our members are very keen to participate in a modernising of the service, but they have particular concerns about the value of careers websites in supporting individuals' career development or career management skills, because they're concerned that this actually remains untested, or there's a lot of assumptions being made about the value of these websites. And the concerns that they have in terms of going forward is that the input in schools in terms of the new model is based very much that many pupils will use the My World of Work website and may not need individual contact with a careers advisor. And there is no research to date that appears to imply that that is actually factually correct. Historically, we offered a system whereby pupils who were perceived as academic could self-refer to see the careers advisor, and this was actually very useful because that allowed the opportunity for young people, when they saw the benefit and the need to see a careers advisor, to actually come forward and see the careers advisor there and then. Now, with the new system going forward, we are asking young people to firstly register on the website and then use some aspects of the website and then come forward and perhaps see the careers advisor. Now, any person who deals with young people or who has sons and daughters will know that that is a tremendously idealistic situation to have. We all have young people as sons or daughters, or when we're working with young people, we actually need a lot of encouragement to get them to actually carry out and deliver tasks that is asked for them. And the concern our members have in terms of some of the new model of delivery is that lots of young people may not necessarily come forward and seek to see the careers advisor. And we're making assumptions that these young people will undoubtedly still go to college and university, but did they make a well-informed choice about that college or university course, or will they ultimately make a last-minute decision about going forward? And that's the concerns that our members have. Our members welcome the My World of website. It's a very useful information tool, but there are massive assumptions being made that it offers high-quality advice and guidance. Young people need advice and guidance on how to interpret and evaluate careers information. That's the important thing for our members, and they're concerned that the new service going forward has an over-reliance on web-based services. It's making a lot of assumptions, and that's the concerns they have in terms of the way advice and guidance is moving forward over the next 12 months.
I think we can also say it's not just anecdotal in terms of what we're saying about our members. We conducted a recent survey with them and found that the vast majority felt that there was this over-reliance on web-based services, and there was fears that we were placing far too much emphasis in the future in that, as opposed to the face-to-face, which is, I mean, our members' value is absolutely crucial when young people are making any kind of decisions about their future.
Lastly, I would also say that recently, since the 3rd of September, a lot of our members have been in schools. Now there are some 140,000 pupils in Scotland in S4, 5 and 6, and our members have been raising the profile of the My World of Work website in an attempt to encourage young people to actually register on the website. Now to date, it appears that the registration figures are not necessarily of a very high level. Now that should be a worry, I think, to all of us in here as parents and as people concerned about how young people make a successful transition from school to the world of work. And over the next 6 months or so, I think we're making massive assumptions that a lot of young people are actually managing their own careers over the next 6 months. And that's our concern, that going forward, higher education as well will also be concerned about possible dropout rates, retention rates of young people. Because the new model ultimately says 75% of young people will be directed or get their needs met by the website service for information, and that's a concern we have. We wish to see the organisation looking at this over the next 12 months and see what fine-tuning is required going forward.
You mentioned...
Sorry to interrupt, Neil, but could we get a response from SDS on, for those are quite serious concerns that have been raised, just before you move on, if we can get a response from SDS management on this?
I'll try and give some background to this. First of all, the development of the service was informed by work done by the OECD, World Bank, and also by the European Commission, which identified, in terms of a modern career service, there were a number of different elements that needed to contribute to that. That included highly qualified staff. We made a huge commitment in that area. Number two, web services, because in effect, that's an immediate access point for many young people nowadays, and it also allows them access over a longer period of time, during the week and during the day. The second thing, it should be lifelong, because people make many changes of job during the course of their career. And fourthly, that in fact it should be a basis of developing career management skills amongst individuals, because that allows them to manage their careers as they work their way through their working life and respond to different challenges and changes that confront them. At present, we have 146,000 people registered. More than half of those are young people under the age of 19. The registrations in the last 2 months have been between 15 and 18,000 per month. So the work that James and Derek are doing in terms of promoting the service that's offered within My World of Work is bearing fruit. Young people are doing that. We've had strong support from directors of education and from head teachers around the basis of that service and what's included within that. My World of Work is not purely an information and advice support. There are a number of tools there which are there to help young people develop those career management skills of self, strengths, horizons and networks, to better prepare them and to allow them to understand how they might plan their career in the future. The scenario up until now is that young people are working their way through that. They're using those tools clearly we would want to publicise that more, and that work is going on, as Derek and James have outlined. The scenario then, beyond that, is we recognise that there are some young people for whom they need that face-to-face support. We've identified some young people who are particularly at risk, with whom we want to target that support, because they are at risk. They don't necessarily have the support at home, and they might not even have access to internet and various other sources. So these young people suffer a number of disadvantages, and that's why we're trying to target them with a coaching approach that takes them through what they require to better prepare them for that next transition. We are, as Derek and James have outlined, encouraging some of our more capable and better supported young people to use those resources. But the simple scenario is, if those young people find that they are still confused, still uncertain, still not sure about what their next step should be, they should quite rightly get advice from a highly qualified professional careers advisor.
Can I just clarify before I bring Neil in? How do you know if an individual who is not obviously struggling and has been advised to go to the website and use the website, how do you know that they're actually using the website properly, are gaining the information that they require from that website, are making the right choices via that website, if they don't come back to you and say, actually, yeah?
I mean, the other aspects around that is obviously the support of the school and the guidance staff within the school. So, we've obviously talked through that and worked that through. Identifying those most at risk is not just from information that we hold, it's also about the school and what they know about the pupils, and they're obviously working with the pupils day in, daily. So the scenario there is that additional background. And the other thing, of course, is obviously if the parent feels, my son or daughter is struggling, then they have that opportunity to make that application as well.
Finlay. 2 points, but just to pick up on that. A, many kids won't tell their parents, and B, many of them, even more of them, won't tell their teacher. So therefore, I mean, there's massive gaps in this. I'm looking at a table here up until October the 31st, 2012. It tells me that across the regions, 17% of the secondary school population, up to 25, in fact, from 12 to 25, are registered. 17%. In authorities like East Renfrewshire and East Dunbartonshire, it's as low as 10%, and the highest on the table is 37% across the whole of Scotland. The average is 17%. Now, I don't know what measure of success we would regard that, but that to me is very, very worrying.
Before you respond, can you just tell us what the table is, where it comes from, so that people have a chance to...
I have my own source for the table, but it's My World of Work registrations, 1st of April 2011 to 31st October 2012.
Just to 2 or 3 points here, just to pick up on the reference that Malcolm made about certainly in the last number of months, because a lot of the work that's been happening certainly over the last 6 months, and when schools come back to work with schools in relation to that increase, and as Malcolm said, in the last few months we're seeing between 15,000 and 18,000 new registrations coming on, so more of that investment in time that, again, James has mentioned in terms of staff. But also, we're working very, very closely with local authorities and schools, and our Chief Executive has been out meeting with the Chief Executives of local authorities, and one of the key topics that we've talked about is around My World of Work, and we're very keen, and we have been working with local authorities and schools to make sure we see more registrations and more use of that, because there's 3 aspects to this. In terms of career management skills, it's very much embedded in Curriculum for Excellence. It's actually mentioned in there under Building the Curriculum for as a key skill. Life skill along with it, literacy, numeracy and other skills as well. So there's a career management skills development that's happening within the classroom and us working with teachers and schools to look at that. The second area we're looking at is how we've actually undertaken with schools across the country a number of group sessions with groups of pupils looking at 2 things. One, looking at career management skills, and secondly, looking at My World of Work and how they can utilise that as well. And thirdly, as Malcolm's already mentioned there, it's about that one-to-one coaching service within schools. And again, there's a targeted group that was mentioned earlier on. And also for that group of young people who think, look as if they're going to achieve. We work very, very closely with school staff to identify those who need that important face-to-face, and no one will be left behind here. If anyone who looks as if they're sorted because they happen to have gained a certain number of hires or whatever, if they require to see an advisor, professional qualified careers advisor in schools, we will look at that, because the point I think about, we've said before, is that 2012-13 was very much about a year of development in terms of how we take forward the modernisation of services. We see this as a 3-year horizon in terms of how we take forward and develop the services, both in terms of our staff, the professionalism and the investment in the skill, the academy we have within Skills Development Scotland, and also how we work with schools in relation to that rollout and develop the further development of the curriculum for excellence as well. So there's a lot of activity and lessons we will learn from this as well through this 12-13 that we want to build upon.
% who's not registered, okay? And I'm in your green category, so I've been told, there you go, there's the website, Mr Finlay, on you go. And I don't register, and I don't tell my guidance teacher, and I don't tell my parents. What careers advice am I going to get, and who is going to check that I'm getting some kind of careers advice? Because I can't see where that's going to happen.
I think the scenario would be if you know, we're playing out the worst case scenario in this situation.
80%,
yeah,
that's not the worst case, it's a common scenario.
I think if we get to a scenario that young person, if they still struggle, they will come forward. They have done in the past. They've done that in the school. There's nothing to stop them making that move now. What we're saying is, what we'd ideally like to do is to get that young person, if they come forward and say, listen, I need some help, is number one, identify what that issue is. If it's a simple issue, I'm sure it would be dealt with by the careers advisor there and then. That's what they're there for. Number two, if it's a more detailed thing that's required, then I think we would encourage them to register on the website and to use the resources there, because that way the engagement with the advisor will be much better informed and they will get much more out of that process than if they come blind and spend a lot of time on basic information rather than really dealing with the issues that they want to address.
Pursue this, and
no,
apologise for the committee to taking up the time on this. If I don't register, previously, you know, in the previous system, you would have had some sort of one-to-one or whatever class contact with a careers advisor. Somebody would have registered that you've been spoken to, you at least know the basics or whatever. If I don't register and I'm in the green category that you believe is okay to just be put to a website, how am I identified by either the school or SDS? Because at the moment, I'm not convinced that I would definitely be picked up. Because you're saying only if I come forward. I don't want to come forward.
But actually, if you'd actually been last year in that situation, hadn't spoken to the school, hadn't come forward, hadn't gone to your parent, you wouldn't have been picked up either.
Can I come in there? I think there are people who've missed, and there has been missed opportunities this year, and I think to some extent young people have been guinea pigs for the new kind of service modernisation. For example, if you're an early entrant this year to university, and I understand that we should be supporting those most in need, but if you're an early entrant, for example, to courses like dentistry or medicine or veterinary medicine, you've not been seen by a careers advisor in the main this year. That can have a fundamental effect. It's all very well saying a lot of people who go into these professions come from families who are articulate and understand the process, but a lot don't, and a lot need that additional support. And for this year, right away, we've seen that people have not had that support, and that may have an impact later on with parents or people being unsuccessful or whatever, but I think it's an important point that people have been missed already, you know, and the process is at a very early stage.
Claire Adamson had a supplementary on this. I'm coming back to you, Neil.
Yes, it's actually a couple. The first one's very quick. You mentioned that you had a survey of your members, and it's mentioned in your evidence, and it's just a straight question about whether you'd be willing to share the details of that survey with the committee. And the other point is, it's been touched on already, is this idea of the comparison of what's happening now that we have the website with what happened before, and do we have the percentage of pupils who would self-refer to the career service in the previous system? And what, you know, we're talking about an 80% not registered, but what was the actual percentage of people who engaged with the career service prior to the World of Work?
If I can come in, first of all, in terms of the member survey, we will certainly intend, or it's our plans to produce an MSP briefing on the survey results in the next week to 2 weeks. Clearly, we need to share that information firstly with our members, because it was the members who participated in the survey. And can I say to you that that survey was completed by almost 400 members of Skills Development Scotland, who currently have a staffing complement of 11,500. Those 40% of the staff were predominantly in the front line or on the operations side of the organisation, which is currently some 995 staff. In terms of the discussion that has happened in the last 5 or 10 minutes, from our point of view, or from our members' point of view, is we ask to consider taking a step back. We talk about registrations on websites. Frankly, what does that mean? Our members would ask. If you register on the Skills Development Scotland My World of Work website, that provides you with information. Our members would argue we make massive assumptions about what young people then actually do with that information. And I go back to the previous point. Our members would argue that it's incredibly idealistic to presume that young people will be very proactive, will look at that information, will put their career plans in place. Our members' experience of working with young people is they need a guiding hand or support through the academic year to ensure they make well-informed career decisions and realistic career decisions. So whilst we welcome the idea that young people are registering on the My World of Work website, the kind of anecdotal story that I mentioned, which I hope is a funny story, is I've registered on the very website because my daughter, being 8 years of age, loves Monster High dolls. And I registered on that website because I saved £10 to get her Monster High doll. Now, have I registered on the very website?
My expertise.
Sorry, Chair, but have I registered on the very website? Of course I have. Have I went back to the very website? No, I haven't went back to it. So I think we need to be very careful when we're looking at just raw data of numbers that have registered on websites, because it's not the registering on the websites, it's what you actually do with the information on that website, and does that actually help you become better at career planning and career development. And that's why, from a trade union perspective, we look to leading academics in Scotland of Sheila Semple and Cathy Howson, who are actually carrying out research currently at the moment, looking at the merits of websites, the My World of Work website, and how it helps young people develop their career planning and careers management skills, as compared to other career-related interventions, such as a face-to-face interview with a careers advisor or a group talk. Now, we hoped that that academic research would actually be used over the year of transition in Skills Development Scotland to help shape and develop the My World of Work website. Now, at the moment, Skills Development Scotland appear to be a bit reluctant to participate in that exercise. We think that's a shame, because they are academics and there's a lot that could be learned from that research.
And then to respond to this, I'll
just ask a question before.
Okay, on you go. A quick one. Yeah.
You said that Skills Development Scotland were reluctant to take part in that research. I noticed from your evidence it says that the SDS have now instructed all staff not to participate in this research, which could have played a valuable role in improving service delivery. I just wanted to ask the SDS why that was the case.
I was going to actually, can I do both? Yeah, if that's okay. Thanks very much. First of all, just to say, back to a point that Malcolm mentioned earlier on, the self-referral model of young people accessing services in schools was introduced. In fact, I was involved in the pilot in 1984. So we're going back that number of years when young people then made that choice to see an advisor. And there was two things happening. They made the choice, or there could be referrals from guidance staff as well. Then in 1985, we had a discussion about the introduction of a careers database called Microdoors. Then in 1993, we had a discussion about career company websites. 2002, we had the Career Scotland website that was then introduced as well. So it's cyclical in terms of the developments in relation to web services, or websites, as the previous Career Scotland one was, to web services we have now in terms of the various tools that are then contained within that. So a lot of this is, it's not about the service we have now, something that then starts to exclude people. People in the past have chosen whether to see an advisor or not, because not everybody needs to see an advisor on a face-to-face basis. It's those who actually need that. So I just wanted to reiterate that over the last, well, since 1984, this has been an ongoing discussion about the value of that, and there's been various research done through UK CES has done some work, and also in the CIAG strategy from Scottish Government. It talks again here about webs and the services and My World of Work as well. The other point about in terms of research, we've just launched our research and evaluation strategy within SDS, and there'll be a very detailed plan will be pulled together by the early new year, and that will contain our own timeline for independent research and evaluation right across the board in terms of the services that we provide. I mentioned MAs earlier on, and the survey work happening there, and the same will also apply around the services we have in terms of career management skills and also looking at My World of Work. So they're all programmed and planned, and they will be from next year to take forward that. The other issue for us as well in relation to the current survey around career management skills, because it's referred to as part of the research, we've only introduced career management skills from an SDS perspective since October. So it's far too early to start evaluating career management skills in relation to what we're delivering in schools when we've just introduced it. What we would want to do, and again in partnership in the future as we go forward, is to look to see how we can all work together in terms of what Derek and James have said, and also working with other partners that they mentioned as well in terms of how we could look at that particular research as we go forward.
Sorry, I'm not sure that you answered the second question directly.
That was the one about why we're not involved.
Why did you instruct members?
So all we've said
not
is, no, because as I said earlier, what we're conducting our own. We've got our own research and evaluation strategy. It's just been agreed with the senior management team within the organisation. Then there'll be a detailed plan produced early in the new year, which will include how we will undertake the research and evaluation across all our services. The second point is staff. We know in terms of any period of change and uncertainty, it's very, very important we work with them. To then start to look at evaluation now, we're only just introducing as an extra burden on top of staff in relation to the services that we're providing. So we felt any evaluation of career management skills was inappropriate at this particular stage because it's too early. And I met with both the Edinburgh University staff to put that on, to say that to them. We feel it's too early, and we would have preferred this at a later date.
Thank you very much.
Okay. I'm not sure how that could necessarily preclude taking part in a survey conducted by Unison. In terms of the survey the research being conducted by Unison, is Howison and
commissioned by Unison,
commissioned by
independent and impartial.
Sorry, commissioned by Unison. Howison and Semple, is that? Yeah. Are they the same Howison and Semple that research was commissioned by Career Scotland in 2009?
Ultimately, what's happened, Neil, is that Semple and Howison conducted academic research on behalf of Skills Development Scotland, or Career Scotland as it was then in 2008-09, and that was looking at areas of careers websites at that time. Now, to be fair to Skills Development Scotland, the websites that Semple and Howison looked at were things like the Old Planet website that Danny's mentioned, and also the Old Career Scotland website. Plus, one of the arguments that was made was that in terms of the research, when they spoke to the young people, the timescale between the initial and the secondary questionnaire was a short timescale. So an argument was understandably made, well, it's a short timescale to see what kind of distances travelled or in terms of careers management skills. But that research at that time, the timelines between the two questionnaires were timelines not in control of the academics, but because Skills Development Scotland wanted the response of the survey results. The current academic research that they're carrying out, and I think it's important, as my colleague mentioned, this isn't Unison research, this is impartial academic research. That research is frankly a follow-on from the research carried on by Skills Development Scotland, and their academic research is ultimately asking what impact, if any, does career websites have on the careers management skills of S4 pupils, looking at that alongside other formal career-related interventions such as a group talk, a careers interview, and also equally important, and I'm glad Malcolm mentioned it, it's also looking at other personal socio-economic factors such as, for example, is there a history of low income in the family? Is there a history of someone in the family actually going to university in college before? Is there any parental support in the whole progression of young people from school to the world of work? And we hoped that that academic research, once published, how it would benefit the organisation at all, is it's not academic research funded by the organisation, it's impartial, independent academic research that hopefully when published by the Scottish Government would look at that, and also Skills Development Scotland would look at that to help inform, not on its own, but one of various, hopefully, pieces of research that's done to help shape the service going forward. And from our members' point of view, they think it's a bit of a PR disaster that these leading academics in careers guidance north of the border are carrying out a piece of academic research and the organisation is deciding not to allow its staff to participate in it. Now, that is the organisation's decision and we accept that, but our members think that it's not exactly a good sign to be showing that the independent research has been carried out by academics, and it would help shape the new model going forward, especially, as Danny said, it's the year of transition.
Do you not accept, Mr Corrie, Mr Logue's point, though, that, and he outlined all of the research that is going to be undertaken and the work that's going to be undertaken, that given that, you know, it was only introduced in October, that really it's a little bit early to be jumping into that kind of research?
I would appreciate that issue, Mr Maxwell, but I think you need to understand the research isn't reporting back tomorrow. The research is going to then take further cognizance of young people's careers management skills early in spring and then report back next summer. And it's not going to be a fundamental, this is exactly the implications for careers management skills, but it's certainly a piece of academic research that surely should be considered in the year of transition.
Okay, we've spent a lot of time on this. I'll come back to you, but I've got other members who want to come in. Firstly, Joan, and then Claire, and then we'll come back to Neil.
Just a couple of quick supplementaries. You said earlier, I think it was Mr Logue, said that your advisory staff were there to challenge gender stereotyping. If a young person isn't getting a careers interview and is relying on the world of work, where's the advisor to challenge the gender stereotyping? And secondly, in terms of the careers interview, if a young person feels they need a careers interview, what are you doing to tell young people that that's still an option? Are there posters in schools, or how physically do they go about getting a careers interview if they want one?
I'll take the second one first, if you don't mind. I think that might be a bit easier. The question, I suppose, is one in terms of the interview would be that. I'm sorry, I've lost my point. Can you repeat your second question?
Person in school, how do they go if they want a careers interview? How do they go about getting it? And are they encouraged? I mean, when you go to the website, I haven't I looked at it closely myself, but does the website encourage young people to seek a careers interview if they're still not sure? Is there stuff up in school notice boards and, you know, like telling them that that's an option and encouraging them to do it?
Sorry. Scenario would be that what we've planned this year is that every single 4th, 5th and 6th year pupil will have an input from an advisor like James or Derek. In that input, it's described the background to career management skills and what services are available from My World of Work. Within that, it would be, I'm sure they would be able to say that if you've used these resources and if you still find difficulty in terms of making those career decisions, then the option is there to approach your guidance staff or them directly to say, I think I need additional help, can I please get that? And then there's a number of different ways in which we can respond to that, which either it might be a full interview or it might actually be a scenario in which there are a group of young people in that senior school who've got a number of shared issues, very similar. You can do a group activity with them to deliver that. These are kind of things I think we want to work through as we go through this year of implementation. In terms of the gender stereotyping, you're quite right. If they don't engage in the interview, then you can't challenge. That's quite simple. But I think what we've got to do is trying to create the atmosphere or the environment in which that kind of thinking comes in. Schools are doing a lot of work around that area. The website's trying to portray a lot of positive examples as well, which is about portraying those kind of issues. I'm sure we could do campaigns within that web service which would promote and highlight those kind of issues. We've already done a recent campaign which is about UCAS applications, but similar kind of things could be built into the schedule to bring that forward.
It was just, I didn't quite get an answer to my previous point about the percentage of people who self-referred previously. If you have that answer, I would really like...
Top of my head, if I can get back to you, that would be helpful. You know,
we can actually provide that information for the committee. Could I just there's one thing, we're talking a lot about a careers interview. The notion that a one-off careers interview is going to fundamentally change a young person's life is one of the debates we've had for many years. Now, what we're looking at within career management skills, and again linked to Curriculum for Excellence, is how do we build the capacities in young people in particular, how do they can manage their careers, not just when they're leaving school at transition points, but throughout their working lives. And given the fact the various changes to the economy, the demands of employers, and that's what this is fundamentally about. It's making that connection with the experiences that are happening within schools and the responsibility schools have for delivering Curriculum for Excellence. We don't want to as has happened for the last 30 years in the career service, when we're delivering careers education programmes that are bolt on to the experience a young person has within the curriculum. This is about embedding the work that we are trying to develop in terms of career management skills within the learning experiences that a young person is actually undertaking at school, both in terms of the academic learning and also back to some of the questions earlier on about work experience and about the vocational and employability skills that they're gaining as well. So there's a whole school experience happening within that in relation to the work that we do in SDS and also the work that teachers and other partners will do in delivering within the curriculum.
Before bringing in Neil, can I just... My example of it is rather old, but I mean, when I was at school, you were sent, you know, I think once in your entire career life to a wee broom cupboard where there was a card index file and said, have a look in there. Now, clearly it's moved on quite substantially since that point, but are you saying, Mr Logue, that effectively the whole system of career management now and careers advice is integrated into the curriculum for excellence in terms of the working school life, as well as the website, etc., stuff, rather than being a separate standalone item?
What we're trying to say is the delivery of what we've called in the past the delivery of careers information advice and guidance. What we're trying to say is that rather than getting something done to a young person in terms of there's a dependency to come and see somebody, we're trying to also develop the capacities that young person or an adult has, because we're not excluding adults here as well, in relation to those skills. And what we're doing, because within the curriculum, particularly building the curriculum 4, when they're looking at all the skills for learning life and what we talked about earlier on, how do we make sure that the experience that a young person is going through there is actually articulated in terms of the support they have, in terms of how they start to develop the skills and how they manage their careers as they go forward in the future, in terms of what Malcolm talked earlier on about the self and about how they develop their own particular self, looking at the strengths that they have in terms of what they want to do, looking at the whole horizons, how they plan when they leave school and transition points, and then it's utilising the networks and the various infrastructures that are out there to help them gain the types of employment, careers and learning they want to do in the future. So it's about making that embedded experience within the school, as I said, rather than seen as something separate.
Thank you. Neil Bibby.
What was the total cost for the My World of Work website? How much savings have been generated through the My World of Work website?
I wouldn't have that information with me. What I could do is I could provide the committee with information in relation to that.
That'd be great. Can I also then ask, you mentioned inputs earlier. I wondered if you could tell me what an input is, and also how many young people at present are unassigned, don't have a traffic light colour.
I'm not sure what the question about the input is in terms of the
Maybe I can help you, because certainly, Mr Barron, you said that all, I think, I'm not quoting exactly, but every 4th, 5th and 6th year would have an input. Right, sorry.
So they would attend, yeah. Sorry, I beg your pardon. They would attend, there'd be a group session delivered to them by a careers advisor, which would cover the kind of things that I outlined. Does that help, or is there additional information you want?
So it's a group. It's not a one-to-one input. It's a group situation.
Yeah.
Can you also ask you about the number of unassigned young people?
So the second question is, I'm not sure if this is familiar, but if the committee could bear with me. When we did the analysis, we identified that we tried to identify a number of young people and identify those most at risk. There was some of whom we were uncertain as to which category they might fall into. On that basis, therefore, we have that discussion with the school in terms of going through. The key thing here is that both ourselves and the school are looking to identify those young people most at risk who are, who might not make a successful transition from school to the next stage, and what additional support we need to provide to help them to make that successful transition. We've got a shared interest in doing that, and that basis, therefore, that's where we share that information to make sure actually there's nobody unassigned.
So you've got X number red light, X number amber, X number green light.
Well,
how many don't have a colour?
So what we have is we have a number of young people who we identify as being targeted, where we want to target our resource. What we're saying is, in effect, once we have the discussion with the school, there'll be nobody who is not assigned in some group or other. And that actually that group is not fixed. It's not a fixed situation. So in effect, I don't want to get the committee to have any kind of idea that this is kind of putting a stamp on someone and that's them. It's about working with the school to provide the best possible support targeted at people who need it. We really do have to move on. A number of members still have to come in on this, so I'm going to take one question each from Colin, Liam and George, and then we have to move on to the next area. Okay, Colin, quickly.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. I'm looking at some of the figures that have been given here. Green category 100,000. Unison in their evidence say there's 35,000 who are amber. I'd appreciate confirmation on that. And there's 200 to 400 that are in the red group. Now, obviously, you work with schools to determine who these particular pupils are, particular students are. What is the criteria, actually, for putting them into these slots? Is it based on academic ability? Is it based on attitude? What?
There's a number of factors that will play in here. Actually, the biggest predictor for young people most at risk of leaving at school and not getting a successful transition is those who leave at the earliest possible opportunity. So if a young person indicates they're going to leave immediately from 4th year or a Christmas leaver from 5th year, that's probably one of the strongest indicators. But you would then supplement that with other information that you would discuss with the school. If a young person's in care, they're they're more likely to be at risk. If they've got some sort of social work support, they've had some issues with the police, all those kind of factors are built in. And that's the kind of information that we work off. Does that help?
Just ask. Just to clarify then, is it actually the school that determines the allocation rather than SDS?
It's a combined, so we will have some information because some of these pupils we will have seen already. Bear in mind that if they're 5th and 6th year pupils, we may well have seen them already, or we've had some information that's come in. One predictor will be about academic achievement, so depending how they get on, that might be another predictor. But you tend to take this range of factors together. So there's a bit of information from us, but there's other information from the school that we use.
Ian MacArthur.
Thank you. Can I welcome two fellow Mo Bros and salute their contribution to the November campaign. I'm taking it's not a style choice. I thought I'd go there. I waited long enough. In the written briefing that you provided, you state that career advisors will not turn people away when they seek help just because they haven't registered on a website, and I very much welcome that. It chimes, I think, very much with what you said, Danny, when we met in Orkney a number of months back. So bearing in mind that we've got the scenario where registration is not necessarily a requirement to getting seen by a careers advisor, given that there seems to be common consent across the board in terms of the contribution the website can deliver in terms of expanding the information, etc., that's available, but also given the fact that we're still a little unclear as to precisely what that contribution will be. Should we not be moving away from this perception that registration in my world of work is a requirement prior to being seen by a careers advisor? Because it just seems to be not happening in practice, and is a potential inhibitor for people self-referring to get careers advice.
I think that there's one of the key things we're trying to get young people to look at here is to develop those career management skills. The web service we've designed has been designed with a view to, in that kind of environment, to replicate those career management skills. I think it's helpful if the young person can register and use the tools. They don't have to register to use all of the facilities on the web service anyway, but a lot of the tools, they do have to register to use those. I think it helps them to get a better understanding about what they need to think about in terms of getting the best value of engaging with Derek and James. But
that's a different wording. Yeah. I mean, you can encourage people to go down that route, but the perception at the moment appears to be that it's a requirement before you can then be seen by an advisor, which just seems to be unhelpful in terms of the context of assisting the widest possible cohort of young people.
I understand the point the member's making, but I still think, personally, I would want to encourage them to use it because I think it's helpful for them, both for now and for the future. But you're quite right, if a young person, we're not there to stop young people getting the advice and support that they need. If they identify that they need that support, then we will provide it. But I think I would still, for their benefit in the future, I would still encourage them to use it. It's a good resource, a fantastic resource there to support them in the future.
I think the only problem with that is if our members are seeing people and they are well qualified and conscientious and not turning away the Greens, there's still problems with that, and there's going to be problems with that in the future. Because in terms of if they've got to see the ambers, and ambers split between light and dark, but if they've got to see the ambers 6 to 8 times, there's no real spare capacity in there to be seeing the numbers of Greens. So although people are coming back to us now and saying, I don't want to turn away people, this person came to my door and they wanted help and support and I was reluctant to turn them away, it's going to be very difficult if they're working to the very prescriptive model that we've got in terms of seeing the ambers 6 to 8 times. It just doesn't, the figures don't add up.
Get to Logan.
Yeah, sorry, just to pick up on that as well. I mean, what we've done, as I said earlier this year, earlier today, we talked about this year being very much that year of development, and as Derek's mentioned, we've talked about this particular cohort of group, Amber Group, this particular group who we've identified as being a priority group. What we have done is we've looked to try and quantify what sort of resource time, and we've said between 6 and 8 times. So some young people will be less than that. It depends on their needs, and that's why the system we have is not as, I don't think it's as rigid as that. It's about responding to individuals' needs. What kind of support do they actually require in terms of that one-to-one service, in terms of that particular group? So that's the first thing. Secondly, we said earlier on, any young person who falls out with that category can still get access to an advisor. What we're looking to do is to say that the previous websites that we had, the Career Scotland one, what we have now is building on the good practice and where we've came from historically in the career services and their previous manifestations. What we have now in there is much more of an interactive service. And what we want to do is to encourage young people to access those particular resources, because at the time, if they have to come along and see an advisor, they're far better prepared to have that discussion in terms of what their particular needs are, and then to inform that discussion they're going to have with an advisor. Because, as we said, it's a very valuable resource we have in terms of how we deliver that service, and that's what we feel is a more effective way of actually delivering that service.
Very, very briefly.
If I could just come in. Our members are concerned that ultimately, in terms of the Green Group, we are making them, if you like, jump through hoops in terms of there's initial registration, then you've got to access elements of, as Malcolm says, the website like, and that will arguably make them well informed for the interaction with a careers advisor on a face-to-face basis. We've talked a lot about young people at risk, and that for our members is the devil's in the detail. What exactly do we mean by that terminology? Our members, who are the careers advisors and the personal advisors of key workers, feel that we should be engaging with young people who are at risk of not achieving their full potential. That ultimately will mean then that we can quite easily, without asking somebody to register on the website, see an academic pupil, see a young person who has got no history of someone from that family being in higher education. We think that's what the debate should be about, working with young people at risk of not achieving their full potential, rather than focusing on young people at risk not of achieving a positive destination. That's the difficulty for our members, because we feel as our members feel that as careers advisors, as parents also, to suggest that some 75% of pupils will have their needs met by a website is a very, very worrying development. They have no concerns about the My World of Work website. It is a very good website, but it is an information tool and should be there to complement and supplement careers advice and guidance, never seen as a replacement.
I'll let Mr Lowe come in for a very brief...
Just to say that we're not saying that 75% of young people are going to be satisfied just using the web service, because we know a number of them will no doubt access the services of face-to-face as well. So it's not a black and white 25-75% notion in terms of how we allocate that particular service to. And remember that the point it keeps saying is this is very much an enhancement and development to what we've had before in terms of what the Career Scotland website was to what we have now in terms of that particular service and the tools therein.
Thank you. Before I bring Mr Adderman, I should have said this at the start, but would members or witnesses please not touch the microphones? They will come on and off as if by magic. So if you just, if you don't mind not touching them, that would be helpful. George Adam.
Like the convener, my experience of the guidance service was probably 1984-85 when I went through it myself, and I was probably very challenging for them as well. And I see my own daughter going through it, and she's equally as challenging now. So I appreciate what you have to go through. But one of the things is all young people are different, you know, and flexibility is extremely important. And for me, there's some people that obviously would need the opportunity of the face-to-face management, and some that probably could continue, as we've already discussed. But should someone need face-to-face actual management, are there still the same amount of careers guidance people within the schools for us to actually do that?
What we have this year is a slight increase from what we had last year in terms of dedicated staff working in school. So we slightly increased that to be able to make sure that we can respond to those particular needs within the school within the classroom.
That's an interesting comment you've made, because one of our members' particular concerns are in terms of the way the organisation is developing going forward. In 2009, for example, Skills Development Scotland had over 1,400 staff. Now, we appreciate there's public sector financial difficulties, but over the last 2 years, we have seen some 20% or so reduction in frontline staff. Now, these are the careers advisors, the key workers, the personal advisors, not only in school, but also in the local centres, dealing with the unemployed. So while statistically it could prove that there's more interventions being carried out in schools, whatever an intervention actually means in terms of drilling it down, our members have concerns that we have considerable lack of frontline staff available both for school work and for post-school work going forward. There has been some 20% reduction in frontline staff over the last 2 years because of a programme of voluntary severance and early retirement.
Yes, the first year, a number of years ago when SDS was created, we had a voluntary severance programme that didn't focus on any frontline staff at all. And one of the criticisms we took then is that previously, including the four of us sitting here, we came from career service companies, regional councils before that, and then Scottish Enterprise or Hines and Isles Enterprise, where no front-facing staff could access voluntary severance, so we were criticised for that. And including the discussions we've had with the trade unions. The second point, what we then have been doing for the last 2 years, is then designing and developing the service as we go forward and identifying the resources that we need to be able to take that forward. And the Chief Executive and myself have made that commitment to all the staff now and all the roadshows that we've done. The staffing resources that we have now at our disposal on frontline, face-to-face, is what we're going to need as we go forward to deliver the modern career service as we see it in terms of what we're doing in schools and very, very importantly what we're doing post-school.
Adam, are you okay? Okay, thank you very much. We've spent quite a lot of time in the area, but obviously the members had a number of questions they wanted to pursue, so I want to move on, and I'm going to ask Neil Bibby to take up the next area.
Thanks, Convener. Just want to ask about SDS funding for college places. I understand that the SDS will provide 4% of provision of the 116,000 full-time equivalent college places in 2012-2013. Can you tell us in terms of what that is in terms of headcount and full-time equivalent this year and next year as well, and how you devise full-time equivalent, given that I think you use headcount to begin with, or starts, and also is that the same calculation is used by the Scottish Funding Council for the remainder of the 116,000?
First of all, for the academic year 2012-13, we had agreed with the Scottish Government and the Funding Council to support 5,800 student places numbers within colleges, and that was over the academic year. And the cost of that, so the support for that was £13.1 million to support those particular places under what's called the New College Learner Programme. And what we did was we have been working with all of the colleges and the Funding Council across Scotland to agree proposals that were submitted from the colleges to undertake that particular programme. For 2013-14, Scottish Government and the Funding Council have asked us to look at supporting 11,000 places within that. And the key issue within there, Mr Bibby, in terms of the components of that, I think it's highlighting this, is there's a number of areas. First of all, we've been asked to, what was a key component of it was employability skills. that we've asked the colleges to look at vocational skills in terms of the particular programmes, the learning part, the top part, and also crucially, we felt it was very, very important to build into that work experience in terms of real work experience for the individuals who are following that, and that being supported by something we've called and worked with employers, and this is something called the Certificate of Work Readiness to allow young people and adults to actually demonstrate to employers about the skills achievements they've actually had. So that's what we've delivered. That's what we're currently delivering this year in terms of the 5,800, and I said that will move to 11,000 for 13-14.
In terms of those being headcount figures, what are they in full-time equivalents?
That's just 5,800 individuals, places.
But in terms of full-time equivalents?
Yes, they're full. They're people who.
What's your definition of full-time?
I can't remember. Was it 16? More than 16 hours?
I think if you're asking particularly about full-time equivalent. Sorry, these programmes are negotiated with the colleges. There are various different durations in terms of how they plan to organise them, but they tend to be on the area of, I think, but I'd want to check that and get back to you if that's possible, somewhere about 16 to 20 hours, but it does vary depending how the college deliver it. So if it's possible, it might be better if we get back to you and just give you a specific answer on that.
Has that information been asked by the Scottish Government? Is that information been given to the Scottish Government in terms of how many hours?
Yes. I mean, I think the key point in here in terms of that particular duration, because is that what we've done is we've built a mixture of taught learning within the college environment and the work experience, and colleges are utilising that particular work experience in different sorts of ways. But as Malcolm said, we'll make sure, Mr Bibby, you get that information sent to you.
Thanks, very helpful, thank you. And our final question this morning is from Joan McAlpine.
It was on that topic in terms of these employability courses that you're providing. I take it that the employability fund will be a continuation of the college learning programme. That's basically what you're saying, expansion of the college learning programme, as opposed to adding something new to the college learning programme.
Yes, it'll be next year. The college learning programme will be part of the wider employability fund that will be available to take forward a range of initiatives around this area.
Right, so there'll be extra, and this year there'll be more, not just in terms of students and hours, but you'll be teaching more. It'll be more wide-ranging.
Yeah, what there'll be in there, we're increasing, particularly the new college learning programme part, the bit that colleges will deliver will be increased to 11,000 places. But in addition to that, the employability fund that we'll have for 2013-14 will also encompass other employability programmes that we've had before, like Get Ready for Work, Training for Work, and other types of initiatives like that.
Right. And in terms of these employability courses, how do they differ from what was happening, say, 2 or 3 years ago in colleges?
Yeah, well, the difference, the focus in terms of the key components to be built into that that's been different from the colleges in the past is, first of all, it was about how they actually, lots of college courses are vocational in their nature. What these are is we're actually building into the college provision employability skills within them as well as the vocational skills. But a key component to all this has been the work experience element that we've built into the programme. It can be quite different from other mainstream courses, and also the idea, the certification of work readiness we feel is very, very important, and that came from feedback from employer groups, representatives, FSB, chambers and others, but also from employers themselves. And also it gives us an opportunity to allow young people, in terms of their ambitions to move into the labour market, and make that connection between what they're doing in the college with the needs of the local labour market. And secondly, it allows young people to demonstrate the actual skills they've gained when they've actually undertaken this particular programme. And a final key point about it's worth mentioning is that the discussions we've had at college now, at regional college level, in terms of these particular employability skills programmes, is that it fits within the wider employability skills pipelines that happen within each of the local authority areas. That's where our building blocks are. So we make sure there's an alignment of the services and the resources that SDS provides with those that they were delivering through the colleges. And also the wider employability fund for next year, and very, very importantly, the resources and the finances that local authorities spend in this space as well. So we get that much degree of alignment and integration through the employability skills pipelines within the areas.
Sure. And I take it, there's been a lot of discussion when we met college chiefs about hard to reach young people. I take it the majority of people on these kinds of courses would be those hard to reach young people, would they?
Yes, I mean that's very. We work very much with our local centres and our local partners, because in each local authority area there's established local employability partnerships, and they also have youth employment action plans, and that allows us to identify who are the young people within the areas who are requiring various sorts of support. And these particular programmes are working very, very closely with colleges to align to what those young people's those particular needs are. And that's why it's very, very important within each area all these particular services are actually joined up, and SDS is very much at the forefront of establishing service delivery agreements with local community planning partnerships, and that enabled us to align the resources and the services that we have with what's actually happening locally and what we're doing to make sure now we've asked with any new initiatives that we've been asked to deliver through Scottish Government. For example, the new College Learner Programme, the Third Sector Challenge Fund was another good example. We asked those particular partners to make sure that they engaged at the local level with the local employability partnership to make sure there was no duplication and there was an alignment of all the provision within that area.
Very much.
Despite what I said earlier, Mr Finlay's requested a very, very short. Yes,
just when you mentioned the sort of get ready for work and stuff like that, my understanding is that some people have concerns about courses like that just being a circuit where people go on a course, unemployment, back on a course again, and get ready for work. I understand was for under 18s, but that's now going to be changed, and also that people are going to be allowed to repeat get ready for work. Is that the case?
Sorry, don't touch it. Beg your pardon. There's always been provision within Get Ready for Work for young people over the age of 18 to enter the programme. And that's been particularly young people with additional support needs, but also young people sometimes making their first transition if that programme was suitable for them. So I think what we've done recently is we've re-emphasised that that is an option, because we have more young people now leaving later in school who fall into that age category. It wasn't such a factor before, it's become more of a factor now. So that's the kind of key thing around that one. And having given that answer, I've now forgotten your second question.
Cycle, repeated.
Listen, I think that's an anxiety, and it's a genuine anxiety about what we do. We do monitor achievement rates within Get Ready for Work. We do, and that's the same for any of these programmes, to see what impact they're having, look at individual providers. So that is a concern. But it's about ensuring that if we can, that young people actually do progress within these things. The key thing is obviously they are getting those elements of work experience, of additional vocational skills and employability skills. But the one thing we can't do is guarantee a job at the end of it. Yeah.
Previously they couldn't repeat the get ready for work. Now they are going to be able to do that. Is that right?
They tend to have I think only in those circumstances where it would be deemed to be so if they'd done a particular vocational area and in discussion with an advisor had decided that they wanted to change direction, if that was an appropriate option for them, then I'm sure we would recommend that, but only in those circumstances.
Very briefly.
Just to mention, I think also will help there, Mr Finlay, is the fact that we have SDS has established a data hub for 16 plus learning choice. It supports opportunities for all, and that's about how we share information with our key partners, particularly with Job Centre Plus, and also with local authorities and other partners as well. So it allows us actually to track and monitor young people collectively within that local employability partnership happening across the area. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Can I thank all four of you gentlemen this morning for your evidence. It's been very helpful and very interesting. And can I suspend very briefly while we clear the witnesses? Our next item of business is agenda item 3. The purpose of this item is to discuss our future work programme. The clerks have prepared the paper showing the current work programme as already agreed and outlined, and members have now had the opportunity to discuss that paper and any other areas they wish to. Can I begin the discussion by referring members to Annex A of the work programme paper? This is a response from BBC Scotland to the evidence that was presented to the committee on the 30th of October by the trade unions. As members will be aware, we requested, I think on more than one occasion, that the BBC management come and speak to us and give oral evidence here in committee. They have declined to do so and have instead submitted a rebuttal of the union's evidence, if I can put it in that fashion. Do you have members have any comments on this area? Joan? Sorry?
I think it's quite insulting way to treat us, you know, like they're rebutting the trade unionists in a way that means that they can control the situation as opposed to them being examined by the committee. So I think it's quite insulting.
Colin?
In spite of the statement from the BBC you read out previously saying that they intended no disrespect to the Parliament.
It was prior to the meeting starting, so that was a discussion before the meeting started. So yes, I did. Let me just, for the official report, just mention the fact that the BBC did send a response in saying that they were not able or not willing to come to this particular committee on this issue, but meant no disrespect to the committee. Sorry, I'll just get the exact wording so that we're clear on it, so that members are aware what's happened. It said, we would respectfully decline the invitation to attend an evidence session with the Education and Culture Committee for the reasons set out within the conclusions to the paper submitted earlier this week. This in no sense is intended to be or should be regarded as disrespect towards the Parliament. Sorry, Colin, but just to make sure that everybody was aware of what was...
No, apologies, I forgot that was out in the previous. To me, it is disrespect. They've been asked several times by the committee to appear. They've had the opportunity to do so. They have responded in writing, but really there is no substitute for having them here and being able to take evidence directly from them. And I do think this is disrespectful.
Liam?
I would probably just echo that comment. I mean, I know in the conclusion to the remarks they reiterate the reasons why they didn't, but having submitted written evidence, which in of itself was actually quite helpful in terms of providing a context for some of what we heard the other week from the union representatives. Having done that, it does slightly undermine the reasons they've set out for not appearing. So I still think they've got themselves on a bit of a spike here, entirely needlessly.
I mean, this is absolutely dreadful. I think I cannot think of another publicly funded organisation who, having been asked to come before the committee, would respond in such a manner. And I think it is, quite frankly, outrageous that they've done it. If we allow committee to degenerate into a situation where it's now committee meetings by correspondence, then I think we're in a very sticky situation. And they've now, I don't know if they're setting a precedent or if this has happened before, I'm sure it probably has, but if we now have organisations who simply say, nope, we don't want to come and appear before you, but we'll send you a letter, then I think it really questions the system that we have here.
Okay, Liz Smith.
Convener, could I just ask if you could update us on whether this matter, not just relating to the BBC, but any other witnesses and committees in general in the Parliament, has been discussed at the Conveners Committee meeting?
It was raised briefly earlier on in the session as a matter of something that we should keep an eye on, because, as you're aware, particularly in this committee, there were a couple of incidents where there was a decline by witnesses we approached to come forward. But since then, that seems to have receded as an issue. It is, as far as I'm aware, this is the only one in recent times where this has happened.
Might I suggest that, I mean, I think the general feeling of the committee, I think it's pretty unanimous, is that this doesn't help the scrutiny process of the Parliament, particularly the committee system. And it may be something that we could raise in general
That's helpful, I think. Well, just for members' clarity, I did seek guidance on whether or not we could make a stronger request, or in fact require their attendance here, but that is out with the powers of the Parliament. I certainly could not force the BBC to attend the committee, so we don't have that authority. And so we are left in the situation that we are in at the moment, which is that they have declined and we have a written submission. I think the question for the committee now is as you've begun to move on to what we do about that. We have a number of options. Clearly, we can do nothing and leave it here. We can write back to the BBC, asking questions and making various points that the committee may want to make. We can write a report and have that published. We could seek a chamber slot either before or after that report was published. So there are a number of options that the committee has before it. And I just wanted to seek the guidance and comments from committee members on that.
Point, convener, that if it's a Westminster committee, they do have powers to bring people before?
Yes, I believe that's the case.
Right.
Liam.
Further observation, I mean, the explanations for the non-appearance seem to be a combination of we've appeared before the committee on this issue before, and that it would be inappropriate to carry out industrial relations negotiations in a public forum such as a committee. Well, as I say, through the written evidence, they've already undermined that second argument. And the first argument, that has to be the judgment of the committee as to whether or not it's appropriate to invite them along. Now, when they're here, it's up to them what they choose to say and not to say. And we've had plenty of witnesses that have indicated there's territory that for whatever reason they don't feel able at that time to go into. But one can only imagine how the BBC itself would cover this were it perhaps to apply to another witness. And I think that is something with regards to the BBC we need to be impressing upon them.
Well, I certainly agree with that. I don't think it's very helpful, and I think they have rather undermined their own point by the evidence they have supplied. But I think members would be aware that we would not, and I'm sure all members would agree on this, we would not have a discussion and debate here about private negotiations between a trade union and management about either wage negotiations or negotiations with regard to conditions or redundancy packages. That is not something we would do, and so I don't accept that that is a valid argument for not attending committee. I think that's, Liam, effectively what you were indicating. But can I ask members what they wish to do with this particular piece of work? Liz.
Yes, could I make a recommendation, convener, that you, as the convener, on our behalf, of, I think this feeling is unanimous, you make a direct appeal to the highest authority in the BBC to say that obviously we're very disappointed and feel that, particularly in the lead up to the referendum debate, whatever our views are, it is not helpful to good scrutiny of, as somebody mentioned, the public institution, if they will not appear before the committee, and say that we make very strong representation to them that they should reverse that decision.
Well, I mean, I'm quite happy to do that, although we have asked them, I think, now on 2 occasions recently.
I think that if it was in another Parliament, obviously they would be compelled, and it would be helpful. They
wouldn't have to be compelled; they would appear, in my view. They wouldn't. That wouldn't, because. But I'm quite happy to do that. That is one of the options, certainly, that we could certainly write. But we have written already. I mean, the clerk has very helpfully just handed me the latest letter that I submitted to the then Director General. Has changed since then, on the 2nd of November. But I'm quite happy to do that. But how do other members feel about writing in the way that Liz Smith? Sorry.
Endorse what Liz has suggested. I mean, in terms of the person, the highest authority, would that be the chairman, Lord Payton, if he's responsible for governance?
I think it might be that we write to one or other and copy in the other. So we can write to the chairman or the Director General. We'll work out who that should be, and we'll copy in the other individual if that's what the committee's minded.
Is it possible you could draft it and give us a look at it before?
Of course, no. I mean, I would. The letter would be drafted and circulated for members' agreement before it was submitted on behalf of the committee, in my name, but on behalf of the committee. What do members feel about the evidence we've received thus far? Do we want to begin to write a report at this stage? George?
Yes. Obviously, because we've given the BBC ample opportunity to get involved. You know, they say here there's very little to add, but they give us about an extra 10 pages, word for word, of everything that's been said. So it's one of these things. I think we should just go on with the report because they've been given an opportunity to actually do what they want.
Colin?
I agree with what George is saying. I think we should carry on. I don't think there's an immediate prospect they're going to come to the table. So, you know, they have to take the consequences if there's anything in the report they would have wanted to, you know, give evidence on.
There's nothing to stop us doing both, effectively. I mean, to start to draft a report, that won't be available for publication immediately anyway, because we'll have to consider that as we go along. And at the same time, we could write as proposed by Liz Smith. And if they reverse that decision, come along, that would be helpful to the committee's report. But if they refuse for a third time, then obviously we can then finish our report. Members agreed to move ahead on that basis? Yep. Okay, thank you very much. That deals with that issue. The other issue that has emerged, obviously, in the last 2 weeks has been the issue of college regionalisation and reform. The committee will be aware that I received the letter from the 4 opposition members on the committee, and that was circulated along with my response last week. I circulated that to members immediately because it was in the public domain at the time, so that all members could have sight of it. I've also received, prior to that letter, I received correspondence from the Labour Party, well, Mr Finlay, which says, and just for members' information, I'll read it out, says, "Dear Convener, given the weekend coverage of the call by the Cabinet Secretary Mike Russell, the Chair of Stoke College, to resign, I would urge you, as Chair of the Education and Culture Committee, to recall the Cabinet Secretary to the committee to give evidence on this episode as part of our sessions on the colleges and regionalisation agenda." I responded to Mr Finlay to say it would be my intention to call the Cabinet Secretary to appear before the committee on the issue of college reform, and I think we may have already agreed to do that when we discussed the work programme recently. I am sure there are a number of witnesses we would want to hear from on the regionalisation issue. So those are the 2 bits of...
Received those pieces of information?
The correspondence? Well,
yeah.
I received... Well, the first one came from Mr Finlay on November the 12th at 5 p.m, and I responded the same evening at 10 to 8. The second one... Well, the second one is dated the 14th of November, which I believe is the Wednesday. Is that right? The Wednesday? I think that's Wednesday. However, I didn't receive it on the Wednesday. The members will be aware that the letter was in the press on the Wednesday lunchtime. I was made aware of it on the Wednesday lunchtime because of various comments on Twitter by journalists. It subsequently appeared in the press on the Thursday, and when I hadn't received it, and neither had the clerks, by the afternoon of the 15th, I actually, luckily, bumped into Liam MacArthur, and asked if I could have a copy of the letter since I hadn't received a copy, and the media relations officer for the committee was being asked for comment and response from me as convener to the letter. So the letter was in public domain with journalists Wednesday lunchtime, and I eventually received it some 26 hours later on the Thursday afternoon.
It's quite disappointing putting you about the letter before the committee did.
Well, I mean, it is unfortunate that for whatever reason the letter appeared in the press and on other social media forum before it was received here in the committee, either by the clerks or myself. But that's unfortunate. But that's by the by. That happened last week. We now have effectively 2 bits of correspondence on the same matter, effectively. So, can I ask members to comment on those issues given they've now got all information that I have got. Liz Smith.
I think there is an issue as we develop the work programme about the scrutiny process in general. I think there are various issues in the Parliament at the moment about what is effective scrutiny and about the publication of that. And I think it's a very important point that Joan has raised as well, that that's absolutely right and proper, that there should be the correct timescale. But I think, generally speaking, there is an issue about scrutiny process in any committee in this Parliament, not just this one. As I understand it, and I've had cause to have a look at various bits of standing orders recently, it is my understanding that we have to ensure that the convener of any committee represents the views of that committee. And therefore, any statement that is made on our behalf is something that has been agreed to. And I think there have been a few issues over the last 2 weeks, and I don't think it's just within this committee, where that perhaps has not been the case. So I think we have to be very careful when we do develop the discussion programme and what we're going to do in the work programme, that the correct witnesses are brought to the committee, that the Cabinet Secretary has a specific role, which is very clearly laid out, that the convener has a specific role, and that we are very careful in the way that we approach our not only the study of an issue, but the decision-making about the conclusions we make. And that is something that I think we need to tighten up on.
Thank you very much. Other members have comments? Sorry, Liam first and then Neil Webb.
Yeah, just following on from Liz, I mean, I would echo, I think, the comment I made to you privately in terms of the time frame in which the letter was received, and reiterate the apology for that discourtesy, although I would suggest it's perhaps a little synthetic of Joan to be complaining about those particular inconsistencies. I think in terms of the scrutiny process, there are, as Liz says, I think wider concerns at the moment. I think it wasn't helpful that on the back of the decision by Kurt Ramsey to resign, that you as convener found yourself on a programme with a story that was changing by the hour. But it was, I think it put the committee in a difficult position that you were represented as the convener of the committee rather than necessarily a spokesman for the party. I have to say I have no real concerns about the ability of this committee to undertake its role to date. I think we've had healthy and robust discussions on a range of issues to date, and I've had an opportunity to express our differences of opinion where appropriate. I think in terms of the issue that rose up around the Cabinet Secretary's behaviour in relation to the chair of Stoke College, I think there is, by common consent, a view that the Cabinet Secretary's behaviour in relation to some of the leading figures in that college sector, I would suggest goes beyond what is necessarily healthy, and it's something that I think needs to be looked at not simply in relation to the reform programme and regionalisation, which I think commands wider support than sometimes Mr Russell seeks to portray. But I think where a Cabinet Secretary demands the resignation of a chair of the college, I think that throws up serious questions about his judgment and the relationship he has with that sector, and therefore I think that is something that is worthy of specific review by this committee.
Neil Wibben.
Obviously, given recent weeks with the resignation of the chair of Stoke College and also issues around college funding, I do think, yes, we need to look at the college regionalisation agenda, but we also have to have further evidence sessions to investigate issues around the culture within FE and also the relationship between the government, the Cabinet Secretary and our colleges. I think we need to do that, and I certainly think that needs to be investigated in further evidence sessions.
I think for me the issue is Convener, that you know there was public statements from yourself about the committee, when in fact there had been no discussion with any of the committee members, certainly not myself as Deputy Convener of the committee, in dismissing whether this committee would look at this issue further. And I think that really is a problem in terms of the integrity of the committee and how the committee conducts itself, and I just think that's a worry that many of us have.
I'm quite happy to respond to that. I expressed my view on the information as it was available at the time. Clearly, it's always the case, and that is why I have put this agenda item on the agenda, that the committee decides these things. I expressed my view, not the view of the committee, and I thought, as I still do, that what the position was that I expressed at that time was based on the evidence that is available. I think that was unfortunate, and I've said this to, as Mr MacArthur alluded to earlier in discussion with him. It's unfortunate that was then portrayed as I have some sort of power to block this. I do not have such a power. I did not say that I had such a power. And of course, it is for the committee to decide. But I accept that that's unfortunate, and I certainly do not want members to feel that I was trying to speak on their behalf or override their rights to discuss these matters, or in fact decide what this committee's work programme will be. That is why I immediately requested that the work programme should be a matter that was on the first available committee agenda.
Could I just ask, thank you for clarifying that point of view. Given that obviously the comments you made were prior to other evidence appearing about difficulties of numbers and various data that we were provided with, do you think you might have changed your mind?
I'll answer that specific point, and I'll come back to you on that if you don't mind. If there are other members who want to speak, I'll ask that first if they want to make a contribution. Joan, sorry.
I think that the call and the letter, the fact that it appeared on Twitter and the press before it was made available to the committee convener, does show that it's a politically motivated initiative. I think that's the first thing. In terms of the criticisms of the convener, I think the convener has always conducted himself impeccably, and to suggest that everything that we say is somehow going to be interpreted as the views of the committee. I mean, the vice convener often says things I disagree with. I'm a member of the committee. I don't think that when the vice convener talks about various aspects of education, he's speaking for me. And lastly, in terms of the scrutiny of the committee, I think our budget report, when it's published, will show that the committee is a very effective vehicle for scrutiny. And when you look at our work programme, we're going to be looking at college regionalisation, and I think that the scrutiny of that will be as robust as anything that we've done, and I think there'll be an opportunity to look at the issue then.
George?
I think to follow on from what Joan says, I think you'll have to look at the report we recently finished with regard to scrutiny of the budget, where you dealt with it with patience.
Just for everybody's benefit, obviously, I know you're probably not going to say anything, but the budget report is still confidential. It hasn't been published. It's with the Finance Committee to discuss. So before you go on, just make sure that nobody discusses any detail of the budget report.
I had no intention.
I'm sure you didn't, but I just wanted to...
We've gone through hours and hours of it, and I think it's a perfect example of you showed a lot more patience than I would have in your position to actually go through and make sure that you took it forward in an inclusive manner. And I think as chair, I wouldn't doubt the fact that the work that you've done with everything as well. I agree with Joan as well. I do believe when other members of this committee say things on television, they don't necessarily are speaking for the committee, in particular Mr Finlay, who's quite a regular on various television channels. So I think on the whole, I would say myself that I would say that no, that wouldn't be an issue as well. So
must be watching different channels for me, George.
Forgive me, but that is a separate issue. We can speak on behalf of our parties as spokesmen. It is not the same thing.
It is a separate matter. And I don't want this to be an extended discussion on a number of issues which are not central to the work programme. This is a work programme agenda item, and I think we should try and stick to it being a discussion about the work programme. There have been, sorry, I know Colin and Claire haven't mentioned. Do you want to say anything before? Sorry, Claire.
Well, yeah, it was just to I suppose, support some of the comments that Joan and George have both made. Liam used the term, there was a common consent about where we are with things, and I absolutely disagree with that. I think there is no common consent. I think there are calls in certain areas, but I think the very robust evidence that we've seen from the college sector at this committee allay some of the claims out there. So I don't think it's a common consent. I think a lot of these issues have been heard in the Chamber recently in the debate that was asked for with the Lib Democrats that happened last week, and the previous debate. There's many opportunities to question the Cabinet Secretary about these issues within the Chamber, and I think that we have the work programme in place, and I'm sure that the programme as it stands will be robust enough to carry forward any question that the committee would wish to do.
Colin.
Yeah, I've only been a member of this committee for a short time, but certainly in that period I've had no reason to, have any concerns as to the convenership of this committee. That's for sure. What I am concerned about is it's been touched on about the time scale in which this letter was presented to the convener, and it doesn't seem to have been particularly well done. However, looking at the letter itself, it seems to be included in this seems to be a continuation of allegations which there's been not one single scrap of evidence produced as yet. Culture of secrecy, bullying and intimidation, all very emotive words, but even I think the newspapers have been round the colleges and so on and not been able to bring up one single person that would support these statements. And, I have to, in the light of that, tend towards agreeing with Joan that this is politically motivated.
Yeah, sure.
I think that kind of sums up our case, does it not, Colin? That if you want to have an inquiry, you then find out the evidence before us, and the inquiry may come back with nothing. But, I have the transcript, the interview with the convener. It says, when he's been interviewed, the purpose of an inquiry is to find out the facts. I think that's what you're asking for. It's what, Mr Maxwell says. Then the interviewer says, right, you're saying no. Yes, because the facts are not in dispute in this case. It's been decided.
No, I'm sorry. As I said earlier, I don't want to get into it. This is a work programme discussion, Mr Finlay. Yeah. I was discussing, in the interview, I was responding to a question about my view on it, and that is my view on it. That's what I responded to. So can we stick to the question of the work programme, which is the matter that's in hand at the moment? Liam.
Thanks, Stuart. I think it's dangerous to suggest that this is politically motivated. I cannot speak for others, but I think were this to be either a Labour or a Liberal Democrat minister who had called into his office a chair of a college and demanded his resignation, I am absolutely certain that there would be calls from each of the SNP members of this committee for some form of inquiry into, if not that specific incident, then of the relationship between ministers and the sector. So I don't believe this is politically motivated. I think there are sufficient concerns there. It should surprise no one that a series of principles from the college sector haven't been popping up on the airwaves over recent days to denounce the Cabinet Secretary. I think what we have seen, though, are expressions from at least a couple of the other chairs about concerns they have about the management style of the Education Secretary. We've also had a number of the trade unions at specific colleges expressing grave concerns as well. And I think it's sufficient, I would argue, to suggest that some form of inquiry is justified. As I say, I think while this may be triggered by the reforms under regionalisation, I think it goes wider than that. I think some of us have been made aware of concerns in the primary and secondary sector, particularly in relation, for example, to the implementation of Curriculum for Excellence, that speak to some of the concerns that we've seen emerging from the college sector. So I would dispute the fact this is politically motivated. I think there is a justification for having an inquiry into the relationship the Cabinet Secretary has with the college sector. I would suggest it's not doesn't sit comfortably in a wider discussion or investigation into the regionalisation process. But if that's where it needs to sit, then we'll need to find a way of accommodating that.
Sorry, Joan.
Just to reiterate the point, I mean, Mr MacArthur raises the issue of trade unions. We've had all the trade union representatives give evidence during the budget process. We've had the EIS spokesman for the further and higher education sector. Now, as I recall, his evidence was pretty critical of the government. He didn't seem like an intimidated man, and he certainly, despite him laying out other criticisms of the government's approach, said nothing about bullying or intimidation, and none of the witnesses that we saw said anything about bullying and intimidation, not in this session nor last year when we interviewed or we had witnesses from several college principals. So I don't understand where this is coming from, given the amount of critical evidence that we've taken, none of which has mentioned bullying.
So do you want to come back on that, Liam? I don't want to curtail debate on this issue, but clearly I want to give members as much an opportunity to make their points as they wish. So I'm quite happy for you to come back if you want to.
I mean, all I would say in relation to that, we had EIS in relation to answer questions and give evidence in relation to the budget. I rather suspected, had we pursued a line of inquiry that we might have been inclined to do, had that evidence come after the events in relation to Kirk Ramsay, we may have got a different response. So I think trying to demonstrate that there's no case because Larry Flanagan didn't say it when he was in giving evidence on the budget is, I don't think, stacks up. As I say, I think there is enough in relation to what has happened around the case in relation to the chair at Stowe College and what a number of us picked up anecdotally. I'll accept Claire's suggestion that this may not be by common consent, but I think enough of us have been hearing similar stories across the college sector and indeed in other parts of the education landscape to suggest that this is something where we're entirely justified asking for a piece of work to be done by this committee.
Neil.
We've obviously we have heard concerns about the Scottish Government, the Cabinet Secretaries dealing with colleges. I think that we should have an inquiry to look at that, gather the evidence and find out what that is happening with that relationship. I think it would be wrong for us to dismiss what we've heard and what's gone on the last few weeks. I think there are issues that need to be looked at, and I think it would be completely wrong for it to be swept under the carpet.
George?
I know we're heading into panto season, but I think we have to just focus on what's important here. You know, we're dealing with the reform of further education in Scotland, and I think a lot of the good work that's been going on has been lost in this personality politics, which incidentally we know publicly the public just don't want to get involved in because it just becomes everybody's as bad as one another. So I think we have to move away from this because all that's happening in this scenario is this Parliament, this committee, everywhere else getting dragged into this bun fight, which is not what we're here for. We're actually here to make sure that we can make a difference in education in Scotland. And I think that's, Larry Flanagan's already said it, for us all to kiss and make up and get on. And I think that's an important kind of aspect we've got to do. We've got to move things forward and actually head and see what we can actually do and get onto the debate of the proper politics over the personality.
Okay, is that... Sorry, Colin?
I was just going to say, could you perhaps read out the Labour Group's original proposal again, because just to keep it in mind.
Well, are there any other members? Well, okay, I'll come back. I'll sum up what's in front of us. But are there any other comments anybody wants to make?
And again, Convener, I do think there's an issue about scrutiny, that it's not actually to do with personalities. There is a fundamental issue about scrutiny and any Cabinet Secretary and how he operates or she operates within the sectors. And I think we have a concern at the moment. I'm not saying one way or the other we have a concern and it's significant, and I think we need to be very mindful of that. So I'm very much in agreement with what Liam MacArthur has just said.
Thank you. Joan, did you have something?
Just respond to that point on the record. I mean, the Cabinet Secretary has had 2 debates on colleges where he could be scrutinised. He's also answering questions, I believe, in portfolio education questions this week. Every single question is about college reform. And in questions last week, as I understand it, it ran over because there were many questions about college reform and many supplementary questions as well that the presiding officer allowed. I think no one can doubt the fact that he has been put under considerable scrutiny, and we'll have an opportunity to scrutinise him again when this committee covers college regionalisation.
Is it right? I think everybody's had their say. In terms of how we take this forward, well, let me do this first for Colin's benefit, although I think hopefully everybody heard me the first time. Everybody's got a copy of the letter, but there was a correspondence between Mr Finlay and myself, which was not in the public domain, and that's why I didn't circulate it. What it said was, given the weekend coverage of the call by the Cabinet Secretary, Mike Russell, for the Chair of the Stoke College to resign, I'd urge you as Chair of the Education and Culture Committee to recall the Cabinet Secretary to the committee to give evidence on this episode as part of our sessions on the colleges and the regionalisation agenda. Is that clear? Okay. So we have clearly a difference of opinion in terms of taking the work programme forward. But just on the wider question of the work programme, we have a number of things that we have already agreed to do. We have got the issue of the Donaldson Review of Teacher Education still to do, and I know that we've been asking members for possible witnesses, and some members have responded to that, and I'm grateful for that. We have the bill, which I believe will be published this week, and will come to us in the new year on post 16. So those are the kind of main things, and we have, as the paper says, I won't go through all the other things, we've got our own current inquiry into the decision-making process in removing children from the parental home, as well as some petitions, secondary legislation and other matters. So that is the current work programme as it stands. We have got a proposal, or effectively 2 proposals, I suppose you could call it, on the same area. One is, as put forward originally by the Labour Party, about asking the Cabinet Secretary to give evidence on this episode as part of our sessions on the college's regionalisation agenda. And then we had the subsequent letter and the comments today, which seems, if I don't want to, I'm just paraphrasing here, but effectively a separate inquiry on the issue of, and I think scrutiny process was the way that Liz Smith put it. Is that fair? Okay, so that's where we are in terms of what's been suggested. We have a number of options. We can do one, we can do the other, we can do neither, or we can do something else. To sum up, how do committee members wish to take this forward? I leave it in your hands. Do members wish to say what they would prefer to do, and when, perhaps not only what they would prefer to do, but when they would prefer to do it as well? If I could go around, can I start with you, Liam?
My preference would be to have something that stands alone from the college regionalisation. I think there would be a requirement to do that sooner rather than later, notwithstanding some of the work we're already committed to do in relation to the inquiry. But whether that's pre-Christmas recess or immediately after, it would be that kind of time frame, I think.
Okay, thank you, George.
My preferred option would be to make it as part of the regionalisation of the colleges, the discussion we're going to have anyway, and we could discuss everything, whether it's through the bill or whatever. We can actually have the debate then, and I think that's the most important thing, as I stated earlier on.
Just in terms of timescale, sorry, just for clarity, what was your timescale?
Well, I would probably think we've got options with the bill. If you're talking about January for the bill, we've got options with that. And we've also got the FE within the programme as well for later on. So if we're talking about sooner, if we're going to discuss things with regards to the colleges, we might as well do it when we've got the bill in January.
Just again, I was just double checking there, we don't have the bill yet, but our expectation is, and slightly, I don't want to overstep my authority, but my expectation is that we will agree to look at that bill as soon as possible, and that would be in January our stage 1 process would begin. So that's, but we haven't seen the bill yet, so we can't say that for certain. Colin.
Yeah, I've been giving this quite a bit of thought as we've been talking here, and you know, it'd be good to reach a consensus around the table in some way. I believe that possibly the best way forward would be to adopt the Labour Party's proposal there, as they originally put it forward, where proper scrutiny will take place. We will have the Cabinet Secretary back discussing this as it goes forward. And I think, you know, as really as soon as the programme can fit it in. I think that hopefully would mean there's something there for everybody.
Okay, thank you. Neil?
My preference is for an inquiry with further evidence sessions, including an evidence session from the Cabinet Secretary on his relationship with colleges and the wider colleges regionalisation agenda.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Support what Neil's proposal.
Agree with that. Okay, Liz?
Fine with that.
Which one?
What Liam and the two Neils have
Okay,
said,
thank you. Joan?
Well, yeah, I would like to back the Labour Party's original proposal, and we can have opportunity to question the Cabinet Secretary during our discussions on the college regionalisation as part of the bill scrutiny.
Okay, okay, come back to that. Claire?
No, I have to go along with doing this within our scrutiny of the bill. And what's been asked for is an inquiry into the Cabinet Secretary's relationship with the colleges and the regionalisation model. The regionalisation model is covered in the work programme by that inquiry, and I certainly don't think the committee's time should be tied up looking at what effectively is a management style issue.
Okay, I think just for clarity, and to be fair, I mean the original email from Mr. Finlay talked about during our sessions on the colleges and regionalisation agenda. Now, we hadn't set a timescale for that, although I think probably we were anticipating it to be some point further into 2013. I have to say I don't think that would be reasonable under the circumstances. To do that, to wait till some point further into 2013. So, and I presume that wouldn't be acceptable either to the Labour Party members. So I accept things have moved on from that original discussion.
I mean, just from that, things have moved on quite significantly from that first email, and that's why the subsequent letter was followed.
That's what I'm saying.
Yep.
No, I accept that, but in terms of the proposal that was submitted, or rather two proposals that were submitted, one by yourself on behalf of the Labour Party, and then you were a joint signatory to the letter. I think there's obviously not going to be an agreement around the table. I think that's not surprising. I think we've got effectively, if I can interpret this correctly, two proposals. One is to have a separate inquiry, as I think proposed by the opposition members, and one is, I think, roughly outlined by what Colin said, which was to look at this, and again backed up by Claire, look at this as per the original suggestion, and what was the original suggestion, by the Labour Party. But I think hopefully members would agree that it couldn't be as far back as we originally envisaged, and I think it was George who originally said it could be looked at as part of the bill in terms of stage one. Is that correct? So those are effectively seem to be the two positions around the table. I'd rather we didn't vote on it, but clearly if that's what members would prefer, we can have a vote. But if we're not going to agree on it, then I think effectively, if we require a vote, I'll do it. But it looks like there are 4 members who support the position originally outlined by, started off by Liam and supported by 3 others, and then the other position supported by the 4 SNP members. And my view is that all of these matters can be discussed and questions can be asked as per the suggestion that Colin has made in supporting the Labour Party proposal to take evidence on colleges and regionalisation agenda, and we can look at this episode as part of that, and that would take place as part of our examination of the bill starting in January. Are members content with that? I know that that's not the unanimous position, but that is the majority position in the committee at the moment.
Just move to the vote.
Well, I'm suggesting we don't have to have a vote. I mean, there is a, but if you want a vote, we'll have one. You wish a vote?
Yeah.
Okay, we have these two proposals as outlined. Is everybody clear about the two proposals? Okay.
One at a time, yeah.
Can you excuse me 1 second? Okay, so just for, that was sorry, a discussion there about the clarity of how to vote on these things. But we have two proposals in front of us. I think it's pretty clear. I think, are all members clear what the two proposals are? If I could describe them as the letter from the opposition members and the original Labour Party proposal, if that's, I know that's not exactly right, but just for clarity so people know what we're talking about. Okay, those in favour of the proposal as submitted by the 4 opposition members in the form of the letter. Okay. And those who are in favour of the original Labour Party proposal, but for that to take place in the context of the bill that's coming forward in terms of post-16. Okay, the vote, as I saw it, just clarification, was that it was 4 members supported the call for an immediate inquiry, and 5 members supported that evidence to be taken as part of the post-16 bill on college and regionalisation reform. Are there any other points members want to make about the work programme agenda this morning? Okay, close the meeting. Thank you.